The entire town watched as Marin Hale's own brother dragged her suitcase into the dirt street and locked the boarding house door behind her. 28 years old, abandoned by a husband who called her too much woman for any man to handle, and now homeless 3 weeks before the first snow. Red Hollow Ridge had seen plenty of broken women pass through, but none quite like this. Too tall, too round, too proud to cry even as ranch hands laughed from the saloon porch. She stood there in the falling light, one bag at her feet, nowhere left to run. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're from. I want to see how far Marin's journey reaches across the world. The problem with being unwanted wasn't the loneliness, it was the noise. Marin had learned that truth 3 months ago when her husband of 4 years, Thomas Whitmore, stood in their bedroom doorway with his hat already in his hand and told her he'd found someone more suitable. She remembered the exact phrase because he'd practiced it. You could tell when a man rehearsed his cruelty. It came out too smooth, like he'd polished it in front of a mirror until the edges didn't cut him anymore. More suitable for what? She'd asked. Thomas hadn't answered. He'd just looked at her the way you look at furniture you're planning to leave behind. The divorce took 6 weeks. The gossip took 6 minutes. By the time Marin packed her things and showed up at her brother's boarding house in Red Hollow Ridge, the whole county already knew the story. Thomas Whitmore had left his wife for Caroline Esther, a wisp-thin school teacher with blonde curls and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. The kind of woman who made men straighten their backs when she walked past. The kind of woman Marin would never be. Her brother Peter met her at the door with his arms crossed. "You can't stay here." Marin set her suitcase down. "I'm not asking for charity. I'll work." "Work doing what?" Peter glanced past her at the street where 3 women had stopped their afternoon walk to stare. "You think anyone in this town wants to hire Thomas Whitmore's leftover wife?" The word leftover landed like a slap. "I can cook," Marin said quietly. "Clean rooms. Keep books." "I already got a cook, and the guests don't want to see—" Peter caught himself, but not fast enough. His eyes flicked down to her waist, then away. "It's not personal, Marin. It's business." "Right." She picked up her suitcase. "Business. Where are you going?" "Does it matter?" Peter shifted his weight, guilt crossing his face for just a second before he smothered it. "Look, if you want to stay one night—" "I don't want your pity, Peter." "Then what do you want?" Marin looked at him for a long moment. Her little brother, who used to follow her around the ranch when they were kids, who cried into her shoulder when their mother died, who'd promised at the funeral that they'd always take care of each other. "Nothing," she said. "I don't want anything from you." She turned and walked. Behind her, Peter called out something that might have been an apology, but Marin didn't stop. She made it to the end of the block before her hands started shaking. 2 more blocks before her vision blurred. By the time she reached the edge of town, where the boardwalk turned to dirt road and the buildings gave way to scrub grass and empty sky, she was crying hard enough that she had to sit down. She sat there on her suitcase for maybe 20 minutes, watching the sun sink lower. A freight wagon rolled past, the driver staring at her with open curiosity. Then 2 women on horseback, whispering to each other. Then nothing. Just wind and the distant sound of the saloon piano and the particular kind of silence that comes when you realize nobody's coming to save you. Marin wiped her face with her sleeve and stood up. "All right," she said to nobody. "All right." She didn't know where she was going. She just started walking toward the center of town because staying still felt worse. Red Hollow Ridge was the kind of frontier settlement that looked temporary even though it had been there for 15 years. Buildings leaned, boardwalks sagged. Everything was built with the assumption that something better was coming later, except later never came. The main street had a general store, a bank, a church, 2 saloons, a livery stable, and a hotel that rented rooms by the week to cowhands passing through. Marin walked past all of it with her head up and her suitcase banging against her leg. People stared. She'd expected that. What she hadn't expected was the laughter. It started at the saloon, a low rumble of male voices, then a bark of amusement that spilled out onto the street. One of the ranch hands leaned out over the porch rail, grinning. "Hey boys, guess Thomas Whitmore's casting off some extra weight." The others howled. Marin kept walking. "Need help carrying that bag, ma'am?" "Looks heavy." More laughter. She turned the corner and kept going, her face burning. The women were worse. They didn't laugh. They just watched with cold, calculating eyes, like they were measuring her against some invisible standard and finding her lacking. One of them, a sharp-faced woman in a green dress, leaned over to her companion and whispered something that made them both smile. Marin's hands tightened on the suitcase handle. She had maybe $7 in her pocket, no job, no family willing to take her in, and a town full of strangers who'd already decided she wasn't worth their kindness. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else. Anger. Not the hot, reckless kind. The slow-burning type that settled in your bones and made you stubborn. "Fine," she muttered under her breath. "Fine." She stopped in front of the general store, set down her suitcase, and walked inside. The place smelled like leather and tobacco and coffee beans. Shelves lined the walls stocked with canned goods, fabric bolts, tools, ammunition. A middle-aged man with mutton chop whiskers stood behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up when the door chimes rang. "Help you?" Marin cleared her throat. "I'm looking for work." The man's eyes traveled over her, slow and deliberate. "Work?" "Yes, sir. I can stock shelves, keep inventory, handle customers. I got a stock boy. I can work for less than whatever you're paying him." "I'm sure you could." The man folded his newspaper. "But I don't need the kind of attention you'd bring." Marin blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're Thomas Whitmore's wife. Ex-wife, I should say." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. "Folks around here got opinions about that situation. I'm not asking them to have opinions. I'm asking for a job. And I'm telling you, I don't got one." He picked up his newspaper again. "Try the hotel. They're always looking for washerwomen." Marin stood there for another few seconds, her jaw tight. Then she turned and walked out. The hotel manager said he'd already hired someone. The livery stable owner said he didn't employ women. The dressmaker took one look at Marin's figure and said, "I don't think you'd be a good fit for my clientele." By the time the sun started to set, Marin had walked every street in Red Hollow Ridge twice. Nobody wanted her. She ended up sitting on a bench outside the church watching the sky turn orange and purple. Her suitcase sat beside her like a loyal dog. Her feet ached. Her pride ached worse. A few people passed by, couples heading home from supper, ranch hands stumbling out of the saloon. Nobody spoke to her. Most didn't even look. Marin closed her eyes and tried to figure out what came next. She could leave town, walk to the next settlement, maybe find work there before winter hit. But that was 40 miles through open territory, and she didn't have a horse or enough money for a stagecoach ticket. She could swallow her pride and go back to Peter's boarding house, beg him to let her stay just until she got on her feet. But the thought of seeing that look on his face again, the one that said she was a burden, made her stomach turn. She could... "Excuse me?" Marin opened her eyes. Two little girls stood in front of her. They were maybe 7 or 8 years old, identical down to the spray of freckles across their noses. Both wore simple calico dresses and scuffed boots. One of them held a handful of coins. The other clutched a worn rag doll with button eyes. The one with the coins spoke. "Are you the flower lady?" Marin blinked. "What?" "The man at the store said there's a flower lady who sells roses by the church." The girl's voice was high and serious. "Are you her?" "No, sweetheart. I don't sell flowers." The girl's face fell. "Oh." The other one, quieter, watchful, tugged on her sister's sleeve and whispered something. "I know," the first girl said, "but we promised." Marin sat up straighter. "Promised what?" The girl looked down at the coins in her palm. "We promised Mama we'd bring her roses every week, but the flower lady's gone, and we don't know where else to get them." Something in Marin's chest squeezed. "Your Mama," she said gently. "Where is she?" The quiet one spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. "The cemetery." Marin went still. The first girl nodded, matter of fact. "She died last winter. Papa says we don't have to visit anymore, but we want to. Mama liked roses." Marin looked at these two small, solemn-faced children standing in the fading light, holding their coins like treasure, and something shifted inside her. "What are your names?" she asked. "I'm Maisie." The talkative one grinned. "That's Wren." "Well, Maisie and Wren, I don't sell flowers, but I know where some wild roses grow just outside town. If you wait here, I can go pick some for you." Maisie's eyes went wide. Really? Really? How much does it cost? Marin looked at the coins in the girl's hand, maybe 30 cents total, probably their whole allowance. Free, she said. But you'll have to wait about 20 minutes. We can wait. Maisie bounced on her toes. Can't we, Wren? Wren nodded, still clutching her doll. Marin stood up, brushing dust off her skirt. Don't go anywhere. She walked back toward the edge of town, where she'd seen a tangle of wild roses growing along a broken fence line. The thorns caught her sleeves as she worked, scratching her hands, but she managed to gather a decent bunch. Nothing fancy, but they smelled sweet and the petals were still fresh. When she got back, the girls were exactly where she'd left them. Maisie gasped. They're perfect. Marin handed them over. Your mama had good taste. She had the best taste. Maisie buried her nose in the flowers. Papa says she could grow anything, even in winter. Sounds like she was pretty special. She was. Maisie looked up, suddenly fierce. Do you have a mama? I did. She passed when I was about your age. Oh. Maisie's expression softened. That's sad. Yeah. Marin smiled despite herself. It is. Wren stepped forward and held out her rag doll. Marin looked down at it, confused. What's this? She wants you to hold Daisy, Maisie explained. She only lets people hold Daisy if she likes them. Marin took the doll carefully, like it was made of glass. Wren watched her with those serious dark eyes, then nodded, satisfied. We should go, Maisie said. Papa will worry if we're late. Your papa know you're out here alone? Maisie hesitated. Sort of. Maisie. He knows we go to the cemetery. He just doesn't know we stop to talk to strangers. That's not the same thing. Are you going to tell on us? Marin looked at these two little girls with their wild roses and their rag doll and their absolute certainty that the world would be kind to them if they were just brave enough. No, she said quietly. I'm not going to tell. Maisie grinned. I knew you were nice. Come on, Wren. They ran off down the street, Maisie clutching the flowers and Wren clutching Daisy. Marin watched them go until they disappeared around the corner. Then she sat back down on the bench and realized she was smiling. It didn't fix anything. She was still homeless, still broke, still the woman nobody wanted. But for just a few minutes, she'd been useful. That was something. The next morning, Marin woke up on the church steps. She hadn't meant to fall asleep there. She'd just been so tired, and the night had been warmer than she'd expected. And before she knew it, the sun was coming up, and a rooster was crowing somewhere behind the general store. She sat up, wincing. Her back hurt. Her neck hurt. Everything hurt. A woman walking past stopped and stared at her with undisguised disgust. Marin stared back until the woman looked away. She stood up, brushed off her skirt, picked up her suitcase, and started walking. She needed to wash her face, find something to eat, figure out a plan that lasted longer than 24 hours. But first, excuse me, excuse me. Marin turned. Maisie and Wren were running toward her, breathless and grinning. We looked for you, Maisie panted. We wanted to say thank you again, but you were gone, and then Papa said maybe you left town. But I said no way, because why would you leave? And then we saw you just now, and… Maisie. Wren tugged her sleeve. Breathe. Maisie sucked in air. Anyway, thank you. Mama's grave looked real pretty. Marin felt that squeeze in her chest again. I'm glad. Are you leaving town? I don't know yet. You should stay. Maisie said it like it was obvious. We need a flower lady. I'm not really a… Please? Maisie grabbed her hand. We'll pay you next time. We promise. Wren nodded solemnly. Marin looked down at their small, earnest faces. I'll think about it, she said. That means yes, Maisie announced. Come on, Wren. They ran off again, laughing. Marin stood there in the morning light, holding her suitcase, and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not hope, exactly, but maybe the shape of it. Over the next week, Marin fell into an accidental routine. She slept on the church steps. Nobody bothered her there, and the pastor didn't seem to notice or care. She washed her face and hands at the public pump every morning. She ate sparingly from the small stash of bread and dried meat she'd brought with her, making it last as long as possible. And every afternoon, Maisie and Wren found her. They'd show up with questions about flowers, about plants, about how to make things grow. Marin didn't have all the answers, but she had enough. Her mother had kept a garden back on their old ranch, and Marin had spent enough childhood hours digging in the dirt to know the basics. "Why do roses have thorns?" Maisie asked one day. "To protect themselves," Marin said. "From what?" "Anything that wants to hurt them." Maisie thought about that. "That's smart." "Yeah," Marin said, "it is." The girls never stayed long, just enough time to ask their questions and hear Marin's answers before running off again. But their visits became the best part of Marin's day. Maybe the only good part. The rest of Red Hollow Ridge still treated her like a ghost. People stepped around her on the boardwalk. Shopkeepers watched her with suspicious eyes when she walked past their windows. The women from the church auxiliary gave her disapproving looks when she showed up for the Sunday service, not because she wasn't welcome, but because she clearly wasn't wanted. Marin sat in the back pew and listened to the sermon and tried not to think about how much easier it would be to just give up. After the service, she was walking back toward her usual spot when she heard it. Voices, low and cruel. "Can you believe she's still here?" Shameless, if you ask me. Thomas Whitmore had every right to leave her. Look at her. Marin stopped walking. The voices were coming from behind the church, 3 women, standing in a tight circle, their Sunday hats casting shadows across their faces. One of them noticed Marin and smiled, not a kind smile, a sharp one. "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Whitmore. Or should I say Miss Hale now?" Marin's jaw tightened. "Morning. We were just saying how surprising it is that you're still in town. Most women in your position would have moved on by now." "Most women in my position?" "You know." The woman's smile didn't waver. "Abandoned, disgraced." The other 2 tittered. Marin felt heat crawl up her neck. "I'm not disgraced." "Of course not." The woman's tone dripped false sympathy. "But you have to understand how it looks. A woman your size, thrown over for someone more delicate. It makes people wonder." "Wonder what?" "Whether you ever really deserved him in the first place." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marin looked at these 3 well-dressed, well-fed women with their polished boots and their pinched faces, and she felt that slow-burning anger flare hotter. "You're right," she said quietly. "I didn't deserve him." The women blinked, surprised. "I deserved better." Marin walked away before they could respond. Her hands were shaking, her chest was tight, but she kept walking, head up, shoulders back, like she had somewhere important to be. She didn't, but they didn't need to know that. That afternoon, Maisie and Wren showed up earlier than usual. "We brought you something," Maisie announced, thrusting a small bundle into Marin's hands. It was a handkerchief tied around 3 biscuits and a piece of hard cheese. Marin stared at it. "Where did you get this?" "From our kitchen. Cook made extra." "Does your papa know you took it?" Maisie's silence was answer enough. "Girls, you're hungry," Wren said softly. "We can tell." Marin's throat went tight. She was hungry. She'd been hungry for 3 days, rationing her food down to almost nothing because she didn't know when she'd be able to buy more. "Thank you," she managed. Maisie beamed. "You're welcome. Now eat. You're too skinny." Marin almost laughed. Nobody had ever called her too skinny in her life. She unwrapped the handkerchief and bit into one of the biscuits. It was warm, buttery, perfect. The girls sat down on either side of her, swinging their legs. "Where do you live?" Maisie asked. Marin swallowed. "Around." "Around where?" "Maisie," Wren murmured. "Don't be nosy." "I'm not being nosy. I just want to know." Marin looked at them. "I don't have a house right now." Maisie frowned. "Why not?" "Because I'm new in town, and new people don't always have places to stay." "That's dumb," Maisie announced. "Everyone needs a place to stay." "Well, I'm working on it." "You could stay with us." Marin's heart did something complicated. "That's sweet, but we have lots of room. And Papa wouldn't mind. He likes helping people." Wren shook her head. "Papa doesn't like anyone. He likes us." "That's different." Marin finished the biscuit and brushed crumbs off her skirt. "Your papa sounds like a complicated man." "He's sad," Wren said simply. "Since Mama died, he's just sad all the time." Maisie nodded. "He tries to hide it, but we can tell." Marin looked at these 2 little girls who saw more than they should have to and felt a fierce protective urge rise in her chest. "You 2 are pretty smart, you know that?" Maisie grinned. We know. They stayed for another hour, asking questions about flowers and telling stories about their mother, and occasionally lapsing into comfortable silence while Marin finished the food they'd brought. When they finally left, Marin felt less alone than she had in weeks. That night, lying on the church steps with her coat pulled tight against the chill, she thought about those girls, about their sad father, about the way they'd looked at her, not with pity or disgust, but with simple, uncomplicated kindness. She thought about the town that had rejected her, and the life she'd left behind, and the future she couldn't quite see yet. And then she thought, maybe I'll stay. Not because she had a plan, but because two little girls had decided she mattered, and right now, that was enough. The next morning started with rain. Not the gentle kind that whispered against windows and made everything smell clean. This was the hard, angry type that turned the streets to mud and drove everyone indoors except the people who had no indoors to go to. Marin woke up soaked. She tried to shelter under the church eave, but the wind had shifted sometime around midnight, and now water dripped steadily onto her coat, her skirt, her face. Her suitcase sat in a puddle. Her hair hung in wet ropes down her back. She sat up, shivering, and watched the empty street turn to soup. A man ran past with a newspaper over his head, cursing. A woman herded 3 children toward the general store, their boots squelching. Nobody looked at Marin. She stood up slowly, her whole body aching, and picked up her suitcase. Water poured out of it. Everything inside would be drenched. Her spare dress, her mother's quilt, the small stack of letters she'd kept from before the divorce. She wanted to scream. Instead, she started walking. She made it half a block before her boot caught in the mud, and she went down hard, landing on her hands and knees in the street. The suitcase fell sideways, springing open, spilling her belongings into the muck. Marin knelt there in the rain, staring at her mother's quilt soaking up dirty water, and felt something crack inside her chest. Need help? She looked up. A man stood a few feet away, rain dripping off the brim of his hat. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 40, with the kind of weathered face that came from spending more time outside than in. His eyes were dark and unreadable. I'm fine, Marin said. You don't look fine. Well, I am. The man studied her for a moment, then crouched down and started gathering her scattered things. He moved efficiently, like someone used to working in bad weather, shoving the wet quilt and dresses back into the suitcase without comment. Marin wanted to tell him to stop, that she didn't need his pity, that she could handle it herself. But her hands were shaking too hard to argue. When everything was back in the suitcase, ruined but contained, the man closed it and stood up. You're the one staying with the twins, he said. It wasn't a question. Marin blinked water out of her eyes. I'm not staying with anyone. They talk about you. Who? My daughters. Understanding hit her like cold water. You're their father. Rowan Mercer. He didn't offer his hand. You've been feeding them stories about flowers. They've been asking questions. I've been answering them. They brought home half the kitchen yesterday. Marin's stomach dropped. I told them not to. I know what you told them. Cook told me. Rowan's expression didn't change. You've been sleeping on the church steps? That's none of your business. It is if my daughters are sneaking food to a stranger. Marin stood up, mud clinging to her skirt. I didn't ask them to. I didn't ask anyone for anything. Didn't say you did. They stared at each other through the rain. Marin had expected judgment in his eyes. Maybe disgust. What she saw instead was something colder. Assessment. Like he was trying to figure out whether she was a problem he needed to solve or just another piece of frontier debris he could ignore. The girls like you, he said finally. I like them too. They don't like many people. Maybe they're good judges of character. Rowan's mouth might have twitched. Might not have. It was hard to tell in the rain. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, he said. Mrs. Chen rents rooms cheap. Tell her I sent you. I don't have money for... Tell her to put it on my account. Marin went very still. Why would you do that? Because my daughters will keep bringing you food until you have somewhere to keep it. And I'd rather pay for a room than explain to the church why there's a woman living on their steps. It wasn't kindness. It was practicality. Marin could work with that. I'll pay you back, she said. Sure you will. He turned and walked away, boots splashing through the mud. Marin stood there in the rain, holding her ruined suitcase, and didn't know whether to feel grateful or humiliated. Probably both. Mrs. Chen's boarding house smelled like ginger and old wood and something vaguely medicinal that Marin couldn't identify. The woman herself was small and sharp-eyed, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and the kind of posture that suggested she'd fought for everything she had. "Rowan Mercer sent you?" she asked in accented English. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Chen looked Marin up and down, taking in the mud, the wet clothes, the desperate exhaustion that probably showed in every line of her face. "You the one been sleeping outside?" "I had nowhere else to go." Mrs. Chen opened a ledger book. "Room's $3 a week, breakfast included. No men, no drinking, no trouble." "I don't have $3. Rowan said you would say that." Mrs. Chen made a note in her ledger. "He'll cover the first month. After that, you figure it out." "I will." "You better." Mrs. Chen handed her a key. "Room 4, upstairs. You break anything, you pay for it." Marin took the key. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank Rowan. And whatever you did to make those girls like you, keep doing it. They don't smile much anymore." The room was small, just a bed, a washstand, a chair, and a window that looked out over the muddy street. But it was dry. It was warm. It was hers, at least for a month. Marin set her suitcase down and sat on the bed and cried for the first time since Thomas had left her. Not because she was sad, because, for the first time in 3 months, she wasn't sleeping outside. The rain stopped 2 days later. Marin spent those 2 days drying out her belongings, washing her clothes in the basin, and trying to figure out what came next. She still needed work. She still needed money. The month Rowan Mercer had paid for wouldn't last forever, and she'd be damned if she'd let herself become the kind of charity case people whispered about. On the 3rd day, she went looking for the twins. She found them behind the livery stable, crouched in the dirt, examining something Marin couldn't see. "What have you got there?" she asked. Maisie looked up, face lighting. "A caterpillar! Look how fuzzy it is!" Wren held out her cupped hands. Inside was a fat green caterpillar crawling slowly across her palm. "That'll be a moth someday," Marin said. "How do you know?" "Because butterflies come from smooth caterpillars. Moths come from fuzzy ones." Maisie's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? That's so cool." Maisie turned to her sister. "We should keep it. We could watch it turn into a moth." "It needs leaves," Wren said quietly, "and a box with air holes." "We can make that." They were already planning it out, talking over each other, the caterpillar forgotten in Wren's hands. Marin watched them and felt that now familiar squeeze in her chest. "I wanted to say thank you," she said, "to both of you." Maisie blinked. "For what?" "For the food, and for telling your father about me." "Oh," Maisie waved a hand. "That's okay. You needed help." "Still, thank you." Wren set the caterpillar gently on a leaf. "Are you staying now?" "For a while." "Good." Maisie grabbed Marin's hand. "Come on, we'll show you the ranch." "I don't think your father—" "Papa won't care. He's too busy being grumpy." Wren nodded solemnly. Always grumpy. Before Marin could argue, they were dragging her down the street, chattering about the ranch and the horses and the new calf that had been born last week. The Mercer Ranch sat 2 miles outside town, sprawling across a shallow valley between 2 ridges. The house was bigger than Marin expected, 2 stories, whitewashed, with a wide porch and windows that caught the afternoon light. Behind it stood a barn, a bunkhouse, a chicken coop, and a series of corrals that stretched toward the hills. It looked prosperous, established, the kind of place that had been there for years and planned to be there for years more. The kind of place Marin used to dream about when she was married to Thomas. "That's the barn," Maisie announced, pointing. "That's where the horses sleep. And that's the bunkhouse where the hands stay. And that's the vegetable garden. Except nothing's growing because Mama's not here anymore." "Your Mama took care of the garden? She took care of everything." Maisie's voice went quiet. "Now it's just Papa, and he doesn't know how to make things grow." Wren tugged on Marin's sleeve. "The roses are over there." She pointed to a patch of land near the house, maybe 20 feet square, choked with weeds and dead vines. But underneath the mess, Marin could see the shapes of rose bushes, dozens of them, bare and struggling. "Your Mama planted these?" Both girls nodded. She said they were her favorite, Maisie said, but nobody knows how to take care of them now. Papa tried, but he just made it worse. Marin walked over to the garden and knelt down. The soil was hard and dry. The bushes were desperate for pruning, but the roots looked strong. With some work, they could come back. I could fix this, she said without thinking. Maisie's head whipped around. Really? Maybe, if your father wouldn't mind. Why would he mind? Because this is his property, and I'm a stranger. But you're our friend. That's not the same thing as, what are you doing here? Marin turned. Rowan Mercer stood on the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The girls ran to him immediately. Papa, we brought Marin to see the ranch. She says she can fix Mama's roses. Can she stay? Please. Rowan's gaze moved from his daughters to Marin, still kneeling in the dirt. That's so, he said. Marin stood up, brushing soil off her hands. I was just looking. The girls were showing me around. They do that. I didn't mean to intrude. You didn't. Rowan studied the dead garden for a long moment. You know about roses. My mother kept a garden. I helped her. This one's been dead for months. The bushes aren't dead, just neglected. Can you bring them back? Marin hesitated. It would be a lot of work. And she still didn't know why this man was helping her, which made her cautious. But the girls were looking at her with so much hope. I can try, she said. Rowan nodded slowly. All right. All right? You fix the garden, I'll pay you. $1 a day, plus meals. Marin's heart kicked. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you work. There's a difference. I'll take it. Thought you might. Rowan turned to go inside, then stopped. Girls tell me you're staying at Mrs. Chen's. For now. You'll need supplies, tools. Tell Hank at the livery stable to put it on my account. I already owe you. Then you'll owe me more. He opened the door. Supper's at 6 if you're still here. He went inside before Marin could respond. Maisie bounced on her toes. Does this mean you're staying? Marin looked at the dead garden, the hopeful girls, the house that smelled like someone had stopped trying. Yeah, she said. I guess it does. Word spread fast in a town like Red Hollow Ridge. By the end of the week, everyone knew that Rowan Mercer had hired Thomas Whitmore's ex-wife to work on his ranch. The reactions were exactly what Marin expected. The men thought it was funny. She heard them laughing about it at the saloon, making jokes about how desperate Rowan must be to hire that woman. The ranch hands who worked for Rowan gave her sideways looks when she showed up at the property, like they couldn't figure out what she was doing there. The women were worse. They didn't laugh. They seethed. Marin could feel their eyes on her whenever she walked through town. She heard the whispers behind her back. How inappropriate it was. How shameless. How Rowan Mercer should know better than to let a woman like that near his daughters. One afternoon, she was buying supplies at the general store when 3 women cornered her near the fabric bolts. The same 3 from behind the church. We heard you're working at the Mercer Ranch, the sharp-faced one said. Marin set down the pruning shears she'd been examining. That's right. How enterprising of you. I needed work. He needed help. Seemed simple enough. Nothing's ever simple when it comes to a widower and an available woman. Marin's jaw tightened. I'm tending a garden, not seducing anyone. Of course not. The woman's smile was all teeth. But you can see how it looks. How does it look? Like you're taking advantage of a grieving man. Or, Marin said carefully, like I'm doing a job I was hired to do. Mr. Mercer has a reputation to maintain. His poor wife has only been gone 8 months. People talk. Let them. The woman's eyes narrowed. You should be more careful. Rowan Mercer is a respected man in this community. There are certain expectations. Expectations about what? About who he'll eventually marry. The words landed like stones. Marin looked at these 3 well-dressed women with their pressed skirts and their pinched mouths and understood. They weren't worried about Rowan's reputation. They were worried about their own plans. I'm not trying to marry anyone, Marin said evenly. I'm just trying to survive. See that you remember that. They swept past her, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and cold judgment. Marin stood there, hands clenched, until the shopkeeper cleared his throat. You all right, ma'am? Fine, Marin said. Just fine. She paid for the shears and left. But the conversation stuck with her all the way back to the ranch. The garden work was harder than Marin expected. The soil was packed hard from months of neglect. The rose bushes were tangled with weeds and dead growth. Some of the roots had dried out completely, and those she had to dig up and discard. But slowly, painfully slowly, the garden started to come back. She worked from dawn until dusk, kneeling in the dirt, hands raw from pulling weeds and cutting back dead branches. The girls helped when they could, chattering and asking questions and occasionally wandering off to chase butterflies. Rowan mostly stayed out of her way. He'd appear sometimes, watching from the porch or the barn, but he never said much, just nodded and went back to whatever he'd been doing. Marin couldn't figure him out. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't kind either. He was just there, a solid, immovable presence that seemed to exist in a state of permanent endurance. One evening, after the girls had gone inside for supper, he walked over to where Marin was washing her hands at the pump. "Making progress," he said. "Some. Girls are happy. They're easy to please." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "They talk about you a lot. They talk to everyone a lot." "Not like this." He looked toward the house, where Marin could see Maisie's silhouette in the window. "They haven't been this excited about anything since their mother died." Marin didn't know what to say to that. "I'm not trying to replace her," she said finally. "Didn't say you were. I just want to be clear about—" "You're clear." Rowan turned to go, then stopped. "You eaten?" "Not yet." "Cook made extra. Come inside." It wasn't an invitation. It was a statement. Marin followed him into the house. The kitchen was warm and smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread. A woman in her 50s stood at the stove, gray hair tucked under a kerchief, stirring something in a large pot. "This is Marin," Rowan said. "She'll be eating with us from now on." The cook, her name was Ruth, looked Marin up and down with the same assessing gaze Rowan had used. "You the one fixing the rose garden?" "Yes, ma'am." "About time someone did." Ruth ladled stew into a bowl. "Sit. Eat. You look half-starved." Marin sat. The girls tumbled into the kitchen a moment later, dragging chairs and talking over each other. "Marin, you're staying for supper." "Did you see the caterpillar? It made a cocoon." "Can we show you after we eat?" Rowan sat at the head of the table and didn't say a word, just ate his stew and watched his daughters bounce around Marin like puppies. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt almost normal. After supper, the girls did show Marin the caterpillar, now safely cocooned in a jar with air holes. Then they dragged her upstairs to see their room, which was full of dolls and books and drawings tacked to the walls. "Mama used to read to us every night," Maisie said, flopping onto her bed. "But Papa doesn't do the voices right." "I'm sure he tries." "He does, but it's not the same." Wren climbed onto the bed next to her sister. "Do you know any stories?" Marin thought about it. "A few." "Will you tell us one?" So Marin sat on the edge of the bed and told them a story her mother used to tell her about a girl who lived in a garden and could talk to flowers. The girls listened, wide-eyed and silent. When she finished, Maisie yawned. "That was really good. Glad you liked it. Will you come back tomorrow? If your father doesn't mind." "He won't mind," Wren said confidently. "He likes you." Marin smiled. "I don't think he does. He's just bad at showing it." Downstairs, Rowan was sitting on the porch when Marin came down. "Girls asleep?" he asked. "Almost. They like you." "You said that already." "I'm saying it again." He leaned back in his chair. "You planning to stay in Red Hollow Ridge?" "Don't know yet. Depends on whether I can make enough to survive." "You're good with the garden." "I'm trying. That's more than most people do." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "You need more work. I've got other things that need doing. Fence repairs, organizing the barn. Ruth could use help in the house." Marin looked at him carefully. "Why are you helping me?" "Already told you. The girls like you." "That's not a reason to hire someone." "It's reason enough." She wanted to argue, to tell him she didn't need his pity. But the truth was, she did need the work, and he was offering it without making her beg. "All right," she said. "Thank you." Rowan nodded. "You'll start earlier tomorrow, 6 o'clock. I'll be here." She walked back to town in the fading light, thinking about the girls and the garden and the strange, silent man who kept helping her for reasons he wouldn't explain. The weeks passed. Marin fell into a rhythm, working at the ranch during the day, sleeping at Mrs. Chen's boarding house at night. The rose garden slowly came back to life. Green shoots appeared where there had only been dead wood. Buds formed. The soil turned soft and dark under her hands. The girls were with her constantly, asking questions, telling stories, occasionally helping, but mostly just being present. And Rowan watched. He didn't talk much, but Marin started to notice things about him. The way he always checked the fence line himself instead of sending a hand. The way he carried his daughter's drawings in his coat pocket. The way his jaw tightened whenever someone mentioned his late wife. He was lonely, not the obvious kind. The quiet type that built walls instead of asking for help. Marin recognized it because she'd felt it herself. One afternoon, she was repairing a section of fence when one of the ranch hands, a lanky kid named Charlie, wandered over. "You're that woman from town," he said. "I'm working here, if that's what you mean." "Yeah, but you're the one whose husband left her, right?" Marin drove the fence post into the ground harder than necessary. "That's none of your business. Just seems weird is all. Boss hiring you." "Your boss can hire whoever he wants." "Sure, but people are talking." "People always talk." Charlie leaned against the fence. "They're saying he's going to marry Eleanor Pritchard, banker's daughter, real elegant lady." Marin kept working. "Good for him. You don't care?" "Why would I? Just figured, since you're spending so much time here, I'm working, that's all." Charlie shrugged. "If you say so." He wandered off, leaving Marin alone with her hammer and her thoughts. Eleanor Pritchard. She'd seen the woman around town, tall, slender, with dark hair, and the kind of graceful movements that made men stop and stare. She dressed like money, and spoke like education, and carried herself like someone who'd never been rejected in her life. The exact opposite of Marin in every possible way. Of course, Rowan would marry someone like that. Of course. Marin drove another post into the ground and told herself it didn't matter. That night, Rowan asked her to stay late. "Need to talk to you," he said. Marin's stomach dropped. "About what?" "Come inside." She followed him into his office, a small room off the main hall lined with ledgers and maps and the accumulated paperwork of running a ranch. Rowan sat behind his desk. "How much do I owe you?" Marin blinked. "What?" "For the work. The garden. The fence repairs. Helping Ruth. How much?" "I've been keeping track. It's in my notes back at, roughly, maybe $40? Rowan opened a drawer and pulled out a cash box. He counted out $50 and set it on the desk. "That cover it?" Marin stared at the money. "That's too much. Consider the extra a bonus." "I don't need, Take it." She took it, her hand shaking slightly. Rowan closed the cash box. "I'm letting you go." The words hit like a fist. "What?" "The garden's done. The other work's finished. I don't need you anymore." Marin's mind went blank. "I thought the girls will be fine, but they'll adjust." Rowan's face was stone. "It's better this way." Marin felt something crack inside her chest. "Better for who?" "For everyone." "That's not true." "It is." Rowan stood up. "You've done good work, but it's time for you to move on." Marin looked at this man who'd given her a job when nobody else would, who'd let her into his home, who'd watched her play with his daughters, and never once asked her to leave. And now he was throwing her out. "This is about what people are saying, isn't it?" she said quietly. "About you and me." Rowan's jaw tightened. "It's about what's appropriate." "Appropriate." "I have responsibilities, a reputation, expectations." Eleanor Pritchard. His eyes flickered. "That's none of your concern." "You're right." Marin picked up the money. "It's not." She walked to the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth," she said without turning around, "your daughters deserve better than someone who married you because the town expected it." She left before he could respond. Outside, the girls were waiting on the porch. "Are you leaving?" Maisie asked, eyes wide. Marin crouched down. "Your papa doesn't need me anymore." "But we need you. You'll be okay." "No, we won't." Maisie's voice cracked. You can't leave. You're supposed to stay. Wren grabbed Marin's hand, silent tears streaming down her face. Marin felt her heart break clean in half. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. She pulled away gently and walked down the porch steps. Behind her, she heard Maisie crying. She didn't look back. If she did, she'd never leave. And staying would only make it worse when the town finally forced Rowan to choose between his reputation and the broken woman in his garden. She knew which one he'd pick. Everyone did. Marin made it halfway back to town before she had to stop and sit down on a fallen log by the side of the road. Her chest hurt. Her throat burned. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. She'd been fired before. Thomas had made her quit her job at the mercantile back in their old town because he said it made him look bad, having a wife who worked. She'd quit without arguing because that's what wives did back then. They made their husbands comfortable. But this felt different. This felt like losing something she hadn't even known she wanted until it was gone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, she could hear cattle lowing and the faint sound of someone chopping wood. Normal sounds. Life continuing like nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. She'd let herself believe, just for a few weeks, that maybe she could have something good again. A job. A purpose. 2 little girls who looked at her like she mattered. Stupid. She should have known better. Marin stood up, brushed dirt off her skirt, and kept walking. By the time she reached Mrs. Chen's boarding house, it was full dark. The windows glowed with lamplight. Inside, she could hear the murmur of voices, other boarders settling in for the night, talking over supper, living their ordinary lives. Mrs. Chen looked up from her knitting when Marin walked in. You look terrible, she said. Thank you. Rowan fire you? Marin stopped. How did you know? I didn't, but you wouldn't look like that if he hadn't. Mrs. Chen set down her knitting. What happened? The work's done. He doesn't need me anymore. That's horseshit. Marin almost laughed. Maybe. Definitely. Mrs. Chen stood up, joints cracking. That man's been walking around like a ghost for 8 months. Then you show up and his daughter starts smiling again and he fires you? Something else is going on. It doesn't matter what's going on. I'm out of a job either way. So find another one. Nobody in this town will hire me. Then leave town. Marin looked at the old woman. Just like that? Why not? You got money now. You can go anywhere. And do what? Whatever you want. Mrs. Chen picked up her knitting again. You're not trapped here, girl. You never were. Marin went upstairs to her room and sat on the bed, turning Mrs. Chen's words over in her mind. She could leave. Take the money Rowan had given her, buy a ticket on the next stagecoach, and disappear into some other town where nobody knew her name or her history. Start over. Again. The thought made her tired. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling around her. Footsteps overhead, a door closing, someone coughing in the next room. She thought about Maisie and Wren crying on the porch. She thought about Rowan's stone face as he told her to leave. She thought about the rose garden, finally coming back to life after months of death. And she thought, I don't want to run anymore. The next morning, Marin went looking for work. She started at the general store again, even though she knew what the answer would be. Still no positions, the owner said, not even looking up from his newspaper. She tried the hotel, the saloon, the livery stable, the blacksmith. All of them said no. By noon, she was standing outside the dressmaker's shop, staring at the Help Wanted sign in the window and trying to convince herself to go inside. The door opened and Eleanor Pritchard walked out. She stopped when she saw Marin, surprise crossing her elegant features. Oh, hello. Marin nodded. Miss Pritchard. Mrs. Hale, isn't it? Or is it Miss now? Either one works. Eleanor adjusted her gloves, clearly trying to decide whether to continue the conversation or walk away. Politeness won. I heard you were working at the Mercer Ranch. Not anymore. Oh? Eleanor's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. Did you find other employment? Still looking. I see. Eleanor glanced at the dress shop. Well, I'm sure something will turn up. Red Hollow Ridge always needs capable women. It was the kind of thing people said when they meant the exact opposite. Marin felt that slow-burning anger flare. You're marrying him, aren't you? Eleanor went very still. I beg your pardon? Rowan Mercer, the whole town's talking about it. The whole town talks about a great many things. Eleanor's voice was cool. Most of them untrue. So you're not? My relationship with Mr. Mercer is private. That's not an answer. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. May I ask why you care? Marin didn't have a good answer for that. I don't. Then why bring it up? Because those girls deserve to know who's going to be raising them. I'm not raising anyone. Mr. Mercer has made it quite clear that his daughters don't need a replacement mother. They need someone who actually cares about them. Eleanor's expression hardened. And you think that's you? A woman who's been in town for less than 2 months? Who slept on church steps and got fired from the one job she managed to find? The words landed like slaps. At least I didn't try to buy my way into their lives, Marin said quietly. No. You just took advantage of a grieving widower's guilt. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping. I don't know what you think happened at that ranch, Mrs. Hale, but let me be very clear. Rowan Mercer is a respected member of this community. He will marry someone appropriate, someone who enhances his standing, not someone who damages it. Someone like you. Exactly like me. Eleanor pulled on her gloves. And there's nothing you can do about it. She walked away, back straight, head high. Marin stood there on the boardwalk, hands clenched, and felt the full weight of her situation crash down. Eleanor was right. There was nothing she could do. She was nobody. Nothing. A discarded wife with no money, no connections, no power. And Rowan would marry Eleanor because that's what made sense. What the town expected. What his daughters needed, whether they knew it or not. Marin walked back to the boarding house and spent the rest of the day in her room, trying to figure out what came next. By evening, she still didn't have an answer. 3 days passed. Marin stayed in her room, venturing out only to eat the meals Mrs. Chen brought up and to use the washroom down the hall. She counted her money over and over, $50. Enough to leave town. Enough to start somewhere new. Enough to run away. Again. On the 4th day, someone knocked on her door. Go away, Marin called. The door opened anyway. Ruth stood there, Rowan's cook, looking annoyed. You planning to hide in here forever? She asked. Marin sat up. What are you doing here? Looking for you. Those girls have been impossible since you left. That's not my problem. The hell it isn't. Ruth walked in without invitation and sat down in the chair by the window. Maisie won't eat, Wren won't talk, and Rowan's been stomping around like a bear with a thorn in its paw. He fired me. I know. Stupidest thing I've ever seen him do, and I've seen him do a lot of stupid things. Marin pulled her knees up to her chest. Why are you here, Ruth? Because someone needs to tell you the truth about what's happening at that ranch. I don't want to, Rowan's been meeting with Eleanor Pritchard, Ruth interrupted. Her father, too. They're talking terms. Marin's stomach turned. Terms? Marriage contract, merger of properties. The banker wants Rowan's land. Rowan needs the banker's money to survive the winter. It's business. That's awful. That's ranching. Ruth leaned forward. But here's the thing. Rowan doesn't want to marry her. Then why is he? Because he thinks it's what's best for his daughters. Eleanor's educated, wealthy, connected. She can give those girls opportunities he can't. They don't need opportunities. They need someone who loves them. I know that. You know that. Hell, even Rowan knows that. But he's convinced himself that what he wants doesn't matter. Marin shook her head. I still don't understand why you're telling me this. Because those girls need you. Ruth's voice was fierce. And whether you want to admit it or not, you need them too. It doesn't matter what I need. Rowan made his choice. He made a stupid choice, and someone needs to tell him that. Why me? Because you're the only person in this whole damn town who's not afraid of him. Ruth stood up. The engagement party's tomorrow night. Eleanor's father is hosting it at the hotel. The whole town's invited. I'm not going to that. You should. Why would I watch him promise himself to someone else? Because, Ruth said carefully, sometimes people need to see what they're losing before they realize they can't live without it. She left before Marin could argue. Marin sat alone in her room as the sun set, thinking about Rowan and Eleanor and 2 little girls who deserved better than a marriage built on business contracts. Then she thought about herself, hiding in a rented room, too afraid to fight for something that mattered, just like she'd done with Thomas, just like she'd done her whole life. Always running, always backing down, always believing that she wasn't worth fighting for. Maren stood up and walked to the mirror. She looked at herself, really looked. At her round face and her solid body and her calloused hands. At the woman who'd survived abandonment and humiliation and homelessness, who'd built a garden from dead ground, who'd made 2 grieving children smile again. She looked at herself and thought, maybe I'm worth more than I believed. The next evening, Maren walked into the hotel wearing her best dress, the one she'd saved from the mud, the one her mother had made her years ago. It was plain, unfashionable, probably a decade out of style. She wore it anyway. The party was already in full swing. The hotel's dining room had been transformed with flowers and candles and white tablecloths. People clustered in groups, drinking wine, laughing, talking. The entire town had turned out to witness Rowan Mercer's engagement to Eleanor Pritchard. Maren stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how out of place she was. Conversation stopped. People turned to stare. Someone whispered something that made the people around them laugh. Maren lifted her chin and walked inside. She spotted Eleanor immediately. Impossible to miss in a blue silk dress that probably cost more than Maren had earned in the last year. She was standing beside her father, the banker, smiling graciously at well-wishers. Rowan stood a few feet away, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly new. The girls flanked him, dressed in matching white dresses, their faces blank and miserable. Maren's heart cracked. She started to turn around. This was a mistake. She shouldn't be here. When Maisie spotted her, the girl's face lit up like sunrise. "Maren!" She ran across the room, dodging adults, and threw herself at Maren's legs. Wren followed, quieter but just as determined. The room went silent. Everyone was staring now, including Rowan. Maren crouched down. "Hi, girls." "You came!" Maisie's eyes were bright with tears. "I thought you left forever." "I've been in town. Papa said you were gone." "I've been around." Wren grabbed Maren's hand and held on tight. Eleanor appeared beside them, smile fixed in place. "Girls, this is your father's special night. You should be with him." "We want to be with Maren," Maisie said stubbornly. "That's not appropriate." "Why not?" "Because she doesn't belong here." The words cut, even though Maren had been expecting them. She started to stand up, to make some excuse and leave before this got worse, when Rowan's voice cut through the murmurs. "Let them be." Everyone turned. Rowan walked over, his face unreadable. He looked at Maren for a long moment. "You came," he said. "I shouldn't have." "Why did you?" Maren looked down at the girls still clinging to her. "I wanted to see them." "That's all?" "What else would there be?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "Nothing, I suppose." Eleanor linked her arm through his, proprietary. "Darling, your guests are waiting." He didn't move. "Give me a minute." "But—" "A minute, Eleanor." She stepped back, smile frozen. Rowan crouched down to his daughter's level. "Girls, go with Ruth. Get some cake." "But we want to stay with Maren," Maisie protested. "Now." Something in his tone made them obey. They let go reluctantly and walked toward where Ruth stood by the dessert table, looking back over their shoulders the whole way. Rowan stood up. "We need to talk. I don't think outside." He walked toward the door without waiting to see if she'd follow. Maren followed. They ended up on the hotel's back porch, away from the party noise. The night air was cool. Stars scattered across the black sky like someone had thrown diamonds. Rowan leaned against the railing. "Why did you really come tonight?" "I already told you." "Lie again." Maren's hands clenched. "Fine. I came because Ruth told me what you're doing, and I think it's a mistake." "You don't know anything about my situation. I know you're marrying someone you don't love because you think it's what's best for your daughters." "It is what's best." "No, it's what's easiest. There's a difference." Rowan turned to face her, anger finally breaking through. "You have no right. Those girls need someone who cares about them, not someone who sees them as part of a business arrangement. Eleanor will take care of them." "Eleanor doesn't even like children. I saw her face when they hugged me. She looked like they'd gotten dirt on her dress." "She'll learn." "Why should she have to, when there's someone right here who already loves them?" The words hung between them. Rowan stared at her. What are you saying? Marin's heart was pounding. I'm saying those girls deserve better than what you're giving them. They deserve someone who sees them, who listens to them, who doesn't treat them like obligations. And you think you're that person. I know I am. You've known them for 2 months. And in 2 months, I've learned more about what they need than Eleanor will learn in a lifetime. Rowan's expression was unreadable. This isn't about the girls. Of course it is. Is it? He stepped closer. Or is this about you wanting something you can't have? Marin flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair. You show up in my life, turn everything upside down, make my daughters love you, and then act surprised when I try to put things back in order. Order? You call marrying someone you don't love order? I call it survival. Rowan's voice rose. Do you know what happens if I don't marry Eleanor? Her father pulls his loans. I lose half my herd. The ranch goes under by spring, and my daughters lose everything their mother built. There are other ways. There aren't. I've looked. This is the only option that keeps them safe. Safe isn't the same as happy. Happy doesn't put food on the table. Marin felt tears sting her eyes. So that's it? You're just going to sacrifice yourself because you can't figure out another way. I'm doing what fathers do. I'm taking care of my children. By abandoning them emotionally? By making sure they have a future. Rowan's hands were shaking. You don't understand. You don't have children. You don't know what it's like to be responsible for someone else's entire life. The words landed like a punch. Marin's voice came out quiet. You're right. I don't have children. My husband made sure of that. He said I wasn't fit to be a mother. That no child should have to be raised by someone like me. Rowan went very still. So no, Marin continued. I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I know what it's like to be unwanted, and I know what it feels like when someone decides you're not worth fighting for. She turned to go. Marin, congratulations on your engagement, Mr. Mercer. I hope it's everything the town expects it to be. She walked back inside. The party was still going. People were still drinking and laughing and celebrating a marriage that felt like a funeral. Marin walked straight through the crowd, ignoring the stairs, and out the front door. She made it to the end of the street before she started crying. Not quiet tears, the ugly kind that shook her whole body and made her gasp for air. She sat down on the edge of the boardwalk and cried for everything she'd lost, and everything she'd almost had, and everything she'd never get to keep. Marin? She looked up. Maisie and Wren stood a few feet away, holding hands. We followed you, Maisie said. Does your father know? No, we snuck out. You can't do that. You need to go back. We don't want to go back. Maisie sat down beside her. We want to stay with you. Wren nodded and sat on the other side. Marin wiped her face. Girls, your father's getting married. Things are going to change. We know. Maisie's voice was small. We hate it. Sometimes we have to do things we hate. Do you hate leaving us? The question broke something inside Marin. Yes, she whispered. I hate it. Then don't leave. It's not that simple. Why not? Because your father doesn't want me there. He does, Wren said quietly. He's just scared. Marin looked at this serious little girl. Scared of what? Of being happy again. Ruth said so. Maisie nodded. Ruth says Papa thinks if he's happy, it means he's forgetting Mama, so he tries not to be happy. But that just makes everyone sad. Marin's throat tightened. These two small girls understood more about their father than the whole town combined. Your papa loved your mama very much, Marin said gently. We know, but Mama wouldn't want him to be sad forever. Maisie looked up at her. She'd want him to be happy. With someone nice, like you. I don't think... Mama used to say the roses would show her who to trust, Wren interrupted. She said roses only grew for people with good hearts. That's a nice story. It's not a story. It's true. Wren looked at her seriously. The roses grew for you. Marin thought about the garden, about kneeling in the dirt day after day, coaxing life from dead ground, about the way the first green shoots had appeared, then the buds, then finally the blooms. Your mama sounds like she was very wise, Marin said. She was, and she would have liked you. Maisie grabbed Marin's hand. Please don't give up on us. I'm not giving up on you. I could never. Then don't give up on Papa either. He needs you, even if he's too stubborn to say it. Behind them, they heard shouting. Rowan appeared at the end of the street, suit jacket gone, tie loosened, looking frantic. Girls, what the hell? He spotted them, and his expression shifted from panic to relief to anger. You can't just run off like that. We wanted to find Marin, Maisie said defiantly. I was talking to her. You interrupted. He stopped, clearly trying to get his temper under control. It's not safe. Anything could have happened. We're fine, Wren said. That's not the point. Rowan looked at Marin. Did you know they followed you? They just showed up. And you didn't bring them back? I was about to. Were you? Marin stood up. Don't take this out on me. I didn't ask them to leave the party. You didn't have to. You just had to exist, and they'll follow you anywhere. Rowan ran a hand through his hair. This is exactly why... Why what? Why you fired me. Why you're marrying Eleanor. Marin's voice rose. Because your daughters actually like me. Because they love you, Rowan shouted. And I can't... He stopped. The street went quiet. Even the girls had gone silent, staring at their father. Rowan's chest was heaving. I can't let them get attached to someone who's going to leave. I'm not leaving. You sent me away. Because staying would have been worse. Worse for who? For all of us. Rowan's voice cracked. Every day you were there, those girls got more attached. Every day He cut himself off. Marin's heart was pounding. You what? Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Nothing. It doesn't matter. Girls, we're going home. No! Maisie stomped her foot. We're not going anywhere until you tell Marin the truth. Maisie, tell her why you really fired her. Tell her what Ruth said. Tell her. Rowan closed his eyes. That's enough. Papa? Wren's voice was barely audible. Please. The word hung in the air. Rowan looked at his youngest daughter, the one who barely spoke, who carried her grief like a stone. And something in his face broke. I fired you, he said to Marin, voice rough, because I was falling in love with you, and I couldn't let that happen. The world tilted. Marin stared at him. What? You heard me. You can't, I know. Rowan's hands clenched. Believe me, I know. It's too soon. It's inappropriate. The town would tear us both apart. But watching you with my daughters, seeing you bring that garden back to life, listening to you tell them stories like their mother used to, he looked away. I knew if you stayed one more day, I'd never be able to let you go. Marin couldn't breathe. So you're marrying Eleanor instead, she said finally. It's the sensible choice. Sensible. She's appropriate. Acceptable. She won't make people talk. She won't make your daughters happy either. I know. Rowan's voice was hollow. But at least they'll be safe. Marin looked at this man, this stubborn, impossible man who thought love was something you could sacrifice on the altar of practicality. You're an idiot, she said. Rowan blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. You're an idiot. Marin stepped closer. You think loving someone is a problem you need to solve, something dangerous that needs to be controlled. But love isn't safe, Rowan. It's never been safe. Your wife knew that. Why don't you? My wife is dead. I know, and I'm sorry, but she wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life being careful. You don't know what she'd want. The girls do. Marin gestured to Maisie and Wren. Ask them. Ask them what their mother would say about you marrying someone just because it makes sense. Rowan looked at his daughters. Maisie spoke first. Mama would say you're being dumb. Despite everything, Rowan almost smiled. Would she? Yes. She always said you thought too much and felt too little. Maisie walked over and grabbed his hand. She'd want you to be happy, Papa, even if it scared you. Wren took his other hand. Even if the town didn't understand. Rowan closed his eyes. For a long moment, he just stood there, holding his daughter's hands, his whole body tight with the effort of not breaking. Then he opened his eyes and looked at Marin. If I do this, he said quietly, if I break the engagement and choose you instead, the town will make our lives hell. Eleanor's father will call in his loans, we might lose the ranch, and my daughters will be at the center of a scandal they don't deserve. I know. And you'd still stay? Marin thought about running, about taking the easy way out, about protecting herself from more pain. Then she looked at Maisie and Wren standing beside their father, waiting for her answer. I'd stay, she said, if you'd have me. Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he'd say no. Then, what if I can't give you everything you deserve? What if you can't give me anything but this? Right here, your daughters, a half-dead garden, a town that hates us both. That's not much of a life. It's more than I've ever had. Rowan looked at her, really looked like he was seeing her for the first time. You're serious? Completely. You're willing to risk everything for this? For us? Marin smiled even though tears were streaming down her face. I already lost everything once. I'm not afraid of it happening again. Rowan crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. He cupped her face in his rough, work-worn hands. I'm going to kiss you now, he said. And the whole damn town is probably watching. And by tomorrow, everyone will know. Are you sure? Marin leaned into his touch. I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. It was awkward and desperate and tasted like tears and hope and the reckless belief that maybe, just maybe, love was worth fighting for after all. When they broke apart, Maisie was cheering, Wren was smiling, and down the street, Marin could see people gathering on the hotel porch, staring. The whispers would start tomorrow. The judgment, the gossip, the cruel words, and the cold shoulders. But right now, standing in the middle of the street with Rowan's hand in hers, and 2 little girls dancing around them like they'd just witnessed magic. Right now, Marin didn't care. By morning, the entire town knew. Marin woke up in her boarding house room to the sound of voices in the street below, loud, angry, deliberate. She went to the window and looked down. A small crowd had gathered on the boardwalk across from Mrs. Chen's place. They weren't even pretending not to stare at the building. Mrs. Chen knocked on her door a few minutes later. You've got visitors downstairs, she said. The kind you don't want. Marin dressed quickly and went down. 3 women stood in the parlor, the same ones who'd cornered her before. The sharp-faced one in front had her arms crossed and her mouth set in a thin line of righteous anger. We need to speak with you, she said. So speak. What you did last night was disgraceful. Marin leaned against the doorframe. I kissed a man who wanted to kiss me back. That's not disgraceful, that's just life. Rowan Mercer was engaged to Eleanor Pritchard. You destroyed that engagement. Rowan destroyed it himself when he told her the truth. The truth being that he's been seduced by a woman with no morals and no shame. Marin felt her jaw tighten. I didn't seduce anyone. Then what do you call throwing yourself at a grieving widower in front of his children? I call it telling him he deserved to be happy. If that threatens you, that's your problem. The woman's face flushed. You have no idea what you've done. Eleanor's father is furious. He's already started calling in his loans. The Mercer Ranch will be bankrupt by spring, and it will be entirely your fault. Rowan knew the risks. Did he? Or were you too busy batting your eyes to let him think clearly? Marin straightened. Get out. Excuse me? You heard me? Get out of this house now. We have every right to... You have no rights here. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway behind Marin. This is my property, and I'm telling you to leave. The 3 women exchanged glances. This isn't over, the sharp-faced one said. I'm sure it's not, Marin replied, but you're still leaving. They swept out in a cloud of indignation. Mrs. Chen closed the door behind them. That's just the beginning. I know. You sure about this? About him? Marin thought about Rowan's hands on her face, about the way he'd kissed her like she was something precious, about 2 little girls dancing in the street. I'm sure, she said. Then you better get over to that ranch, because if those women came here, you know damn well they went there first. Marin grabbed her coat. The walk to the ranch took 40 minutes. By the time Marin arrived, her feet hurt and her nerves were strung tight as wire. The place looked different in the harsh morning light. Still prosperous, but she could see the cracks now, fences that needed mending, a sagging barn door, winter's approach in the bare trees and brown grass. Rowan was in the corral, working with a young horse. He saw her coming and stopped. You shouldn't be here, he said. Probably not. Town's already talking. They were talking before. Now they're just louder. Rowan handed the horse's lead rope to one of the ranch hands and walked over. His face was drawn like he hadn't slept. Eleanor's father came by this morning, he said. Made it official. All loans are due by the end of January. That's $10,000 I don't have. Marin's stomach dropped. Rowan? I knew it would happen. I just thought I'd have more time to figure something out. He looked toward the house where the girls were visible in an upstairs window. I might have to sell off half the herd just to keep us afloat through winter, and even that might not be enough. There has to be another way. If there is, I haven't found it. He turned back to her. You should go back to town. Distance yourself from this before it gets worse. No. Marin, I told you I wasn't running. I meant it. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. She stepped closer. You chose me. That makes it my fight too. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms and held on tight. I don't know how to fix this, he said into her hair. Then we'll figure it out together. We? We. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. You're really not leaving. Not unless you ask me to. I won't. Then I'm staying. The sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. A rider was coming up the road, a young man on a dusty horse, moving fast. He pulled up in front of the house and dismounted. Message for Rowan Mercer, he called out. Rowan walked over. That's me. The rider handed him an envelope. From Daniel Kessler. Said it was urgent. Rowan tore it open and read quickly. His expression didn't change, but Marin saw his hands tighten on the paper. What is it? She asked. Kessler's pulling his contract, says he can't do business with someone the town's turned against. Rowan folded the letter carefully. He was my biggest buyer. That's $3,000 gone. The rider shifted uncomfortably. Sorry, Mr. Mercer, just delivering the message. I know, not your fault. Rowan pulled out a coin and handed it to him. Thanks for riding out. The young man tipped his hat and rode off. Rowan stood there, staring at nothing. Marin wanted to say something comforting, something hopeful, but the numbers were brutal and getting worse by the hour. How bad is it? She asked quietly. Bad enough that I might lose everything my wife built. His voice was hollow. All because I was stupid enough to think I could choose happiness over practicality. Don't say that. It's true. No, it's not. You chose what was right for your daughters, for yourself. That's not stupid. Tell that to them when we're living in a shack because I couldn't keep the ranch. Before Marin could respond, the front door banged open. Ruth stood there, looking furious. You two better get in here, she said. Now! They followed her into the kitchen. The twins sat at the table, faces tear-stained, hands clasped together. What happened? Rowan asked. Tell him, Ruth said to the girls. Maisie sniffled. We went to town this morning. I told you to stay here. We know, but we wanted to get ribbon for Marin because she's going to be our new mama, and we wanted to make her something special. Rowan's face went tight. What happened in town? Wren spoke, voice barely above a whisper. People said mean things. What kind of mean things? They said Marin's a bad woman, Maisie burst out. They said she ruined everything and Papa should send her away. And Mrs. Pritchard said... She stopped, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. What did she say? Rowan's voice was dangerous. She said no decent man would want someone like Marin, that you were only keeping her around because you felt sorry for her, that once you came to your senses, you'd realize what a mistake you made. Rowan's hands curled into fists. Marin put a hand on his arm. It's fine. I've heard worse. It's not fine. He turned to Ruth. Who else was there? Half the town. The church ladies. Some of your neighbors? Even a few of the ranch hands who don't work here anymore. They said it in front of my daughters? They did. Rowan looked at Maisie and Wren, and something in his expression shifted from anger to determination. Pack a bag, he said to Marin. She blinked. What? You're moving in here, today. Rowan, people will... I don't care what people say. I'm not letting you stay in town where they can corner you and harass you. You'll be safer here. It'll make the gossip worse. Let it. He looked at his daughters. Girls, Marin's going to stay with us for a while. Is that all right? Maisie's face lit up despite her tears. Really? Really? In our house? In our house. Wren nodded solemnly, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Marin looked at Rowan. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. He stood up. Ruth, can you take the girls upstairs? I need to talk to Maren alone. Ruth herded the twins out of the kitchen. When they were gone, Rowan turned to Maren. I need you to understand something, he said. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The town's going to make our lives hell. The bank's going to take everything I've built, and there's a good chance we'll lose it all. I know. And you still want to stay? I already told you. I'm not asking if you'll stay through the good parts, Rowan interrupted. I'm asking if you'll stay through the parts where we're broke and desperate and the whole county thinks we're fools, because that's what's coming, and I need to know if you can handle it. Maren thought about Thomas, about how he'd left the moment things got difficult, about how she'd spent her whole marriage being someone's disappointment. I can handle anything, she said quietly, as long as I know you're not going to wake up one morning and decide I'm not worth the trouble. Rowan crossed the kitchen and took her hands. I won't, he said. I promise you I won't. How can you be sure? Because I've already lost one person I loved. I'm not letting go of another. The words settled between them, heavy and precious and terrifying. Maren squeezed his hands. Then yes, I'll stay, through all of it. Rowan pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to fight for this when I was too scared to try. The next week was chaos. Maren moved her few belongings from Mrs. Chen's to the ranch. The town's reaction was immediate and vicious. People who'd been merely cold before became openly hostile. Women crossed the street to avoid her. Men made crude comments when she rode into town for supplies. Someone even threw a rock through the ranch's front window with a note tied to it that said, "Whore." Rowan wanted to ride into town and confront everyone. Maren stopped him. It won't help, she said. It'll just give them more ammunition. They can't treat you like this. They can, and they will, until we prove them wrong. How do we do that? By surviving. But surviving was getting harder. 2 more buyers canceled contracts. 3 ranch hands quit, saying they didn't want to work for a man who'd lost his mind over a desperate woman. The bank sent another letter, this one outlining exactly what would be seized if the loans weren't paid by the deadline. Rowan spent his days riding the property line, checking fences, moving cattle to better grazing areas, doing everything he could to maximize what little time they had left. Maren spent her days working the rose garden and helping Ruth with the household tasks. The girls stayed close to her, like they were afraid she'd disappear if they looked away too long. At night, Rowan and Maren sat on the porch after the girls went to bed and tried to figure out a solution that didn't exist. I could sell the north pasture, Rowan said one evening. That might bring in $4,000. That's not enough. I know, but it's something. What about taking on a partner, someone who could invest in exchange for part ownership? Who would want to partner with me now? The whole county knows I'm going under. Maren leaned her head on his shoulder. There has to be something we're not seeing. Maybe there isn't. Rowan's voice was tired. Maybe I gambled and lost. And now we all pay the price. Don't talk like that. It's true. It's not over yet. It will be soon. They sat in silence, watching the stars come out. Then Maren sat up. The roses. Rowan looked at her. What? Your wife's roses. They're coming back. By spring, they'll be blooming. So? So people loved your wife. They respected her. What if we use the garden as a memorial? Open it to visitors, sell cuttings, make it something the town can't ignore. Rowan shook his head. That won't bring in enough money. Not by itself. But what if we did more? What if we turned part of the ranch into something else? A place people want to visit? Like what? Maren's mind was racing now. I don't know yet, but your wife knew how to make things grow, and that garden was special to her. Maybe it can be special to other people too. Maren, just think about it. We have until January. That gives us a few months to try something different. Rowan looked skeptical, but he nodded. All right, we'll try. 2 days later, a wagon showed up at the ranch. Ruth answered the door and came back looking confused. There's a man here, she said. Says he's got supplies you ordered. Rowan frowned. I didn't order anything. They went outside. A grizzled man in his 60s stood beside a wagon loaded with seed packets, fertilizer, gardening tools, and wooden stakes. Delivery for Maren Hale, he said. Marin stepped forward. I didn't order any of this. Someone did. Paid in full. Said to bring it out here. He handed her a slip of paper. Marin unfolded it. The handwriting was neat and unfamiliar. Heard you're starting a garden. These might help. A friend. There was no signature. Rowan looked through the supplies. This is quality stock. Expensive. Who would send this? I don't know, Marin said. But something warm bloomed in her chest. Someone out there, someone they didn't even know, was rooting for them. The man helped them unload, tipped his hat, and drove off. Marin stood looking at the pile of supplies. Well, she said, I guess we're really doing this. Rowan put his arm around her shoulders. Guess we are. The work began in earnest. Marin expanded the rose garden, planting new beds and creating pathways between them. She used the wooden stakes to mark out sections, planning for different varieties and colors. Rowan helped when he could, though most of his time was spent keeping the ranch running. The girls threw themselves into the project with fierce enthusiasm. They painted signs, helped plant seeds, and appointed themselves official tour guides for a garden that didn't have any visitors yet. Word spread. Not all of it bad. A few people from neighboring ranches stopped by out of curiosity. A handful of women from the church auxiliary came to see what all the fuss was about. Most of them left looking surprised. I didn't expect it to be so beautiful, one of them admitted grudgingly. Wait until spring, Marin said, when the roses bloom. But spring was months away, and January was coming fast. 3 weeks before the loan deadline, Rowan sold the north pasture. It brought in $3,500, more than he'd expected, but still not nearly enough. He came home and put the money in his safe and sat at his desk for 2 hours, trying to make the numbers work. They didn't. Marin found him there after midnight. Come to bed, she said. I can't figure it out. His voice was raw. No matter how I add it up, we're still 6,000 short. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. Rowan looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw defeat in his eyes. I'm going to lose this place, Marin. Everything my wife built. Everything I promised her I'd protect. Marin knelt beside his chair. You didn't promise to protect a piece of land. You promised to protect your daughters, and you're doing that. By letting them watch me fail? By showing them that some things are worth fighting for even when you can't win. That's not much of a lesson. It's the only one that matters. Rowan pulled her into his lap and buried his face in her shoulder. They sat like that for a long time. The next morning, everything changed. Marin was in the garden when she heard horses approaching, a lot of them. She stood up, shading her eyes against the winter sun. A group of riders was coming up the road, maybe a dozen of them from all directions, converging on the ranch. Rowan came out of the barn, hand resting on the gun at his hip. Stay behind me, he told Marin. But as the riders got closer, Marin recognized some of them, small ranchers from neighboring properties, the blacksmith from town, a few farmers she'd seen at the general store. The blacksmith dismounted first. Rowan, he said. Tom. Rowan's voice was wary. What's this about? We heard about your situation with the bank. Yeah, what about it? Tom shifted uncomfortably. We also heard what you did, calling off that engagement, choosing your own path instead of what the town wanted. And some of us think that took guts. Tom looked back at the other riders. We've all been pushed around by that banker and his cronies, had our loans called in for stupid reasons, been forced to do business on their terms or not at all. Another man spoke up, a farmer named Webb. Most of us were too scared to push back, but you did, and we figure that's worth something. Rowan's expression didn't change. Worth what, exactly? Tom pulled an envelope from his coat. We took up a collection. It's not much, but it might help. He handed the envelope to Rowan. Rowan opened it. Inside was a stack of bills, 5s and 10s and 20s, crumpled and worn. He counted it twice, like he didn't believe what he was seeing. This is $1,800, he said quietly. Like I said, it's not much. It's everything. Rowan's voice cracked. You didn't have to do this. Yeah, we did. Tom glanced at Marin. Your lady friend there did something most folks are too scared to try. She stood up for what she wanted, even when the whole town was against her. That's worth supporting. Webb nodded. Besides, someone's got to tell that banker he doesn't run everything around here. One by one, the other riders dismounted and shook Rowan's hand. They didn't stay long, just long enough to make their gesture and leave before it got awkward. When they were gone, Rowan stood in the yard staring at the money in his hands. "That puts us at about 5,300, he said. "Still short, but closer." Marin looked at the dust trail left by the departing riders. "There are more people on our side than we thought." "Apparently. So we keep fighting." Rowan folded the money carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he turned to Marin and kissed her, hard and desperate and grateful. "Yeah," he said against her lips. "We keep fighting." The next 2 weeks were a blur. Rowan sold a small section of timber rights to a logging company. Marin sold some of her mother's jewelry, the pieces Thomas hadn't taken when he left. The twins emptied their piggy banks and solemnly presented Rowan with $3.47. Every dollar brought them closer. But 2 days before the deadline, they were still 4,000 short. Rowan sat at the kitchen table, running the numbers one more time. "We're not going to make it," he said finally. Ruth was cooking dinner. "You don't know that." "I can count, Ruth." "Counting's not the same as knowing." "It is when the numbers don't add up." The front door banged open. Maisie and Wren ran in, faces flushed from the cold. "Papa! Papa!" Maisie was waving a piece of paper. "Look what we found!" Rowan took the paper. It was a flyer, cheaply printed. "Wanted, cattle drivers. Willing to pay premium rates for experienced men to drive 500 head from Red Hollow Ridge to the railhead in Sutter's Point. Winter delivery, 3 weeks' work. Inquire at Mercer Ranch." Rowan looked up. "Where did you get this?" "They're posted all over town." Maisie bounced on her toes. "Someone put them up last night." "Who?" "Nobody knows. But people are talking about it. They're saying you must have a big contract if you need that many drivers." Rowan stood up so fast his chair fell over. He walked to the window and stared out at his land. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a man who just realized he'd been given an impossible gift. "Rowan?" Marin touched his arm. "What is it?" "I don't have 500 head to drive anywhere," he said. "I've got maybe 300, and half of them aren't ready for a winter drive." "Then who—" "Someone's giving me a way out." He turned to face her. "If I can pull together a legitimate drive, I can charge enough to make up the difference. Maybe even have something left over." "But you just said you don't have the cattle." "I don't, but I know who does." Rowan grabbed his coat. "I need to ride out, check with some of the neighbors, see if anyone's willing to pool resources for a joint drive." "That's going to take time you don't have." "Then I better ride fast." He kissed her quickly and headed for the door. "Rowan," Marin called after him. He turned. "Be careful." "Always am." He rode out into the gathering dusk, leaving Marin standing in the kitchen with 2 excited girls and a cook who'd seen too much to believe in miracles but was starting to reconsider. "Think he can do it?" Ruth asked. Marin looked at the flyer in her hand, this mysterious lifeline that had appeared from nowhere. "I think," she said slowly, "that someone out there wants him to succeed." "Who?" "I have no idea, but whoever they are, I hope they know how much this matters." Ruth went back to her cooking. "Guess we'll find out soon enough." Rowan didn't come back that night, or the next morning. By noon, Marin was pacing the porch, worry gnawing at her gut. The girls sensed her anxiety and stayed quiet, doing their schoolwork at the kitchen table without their usual chatter. Ruth made lunch that nobody ate. Then, just after 2 o'clock, Marin heard it. Hoofbeats. She ran to the porch. Rowan was riding up the road, and behind him came a line of riders, 8 men, maybe 10, from different ranches around the territory. He dismounted and walked straight to Marin. "We've got to drive," he said. Marin's knees went weak. "What?" 5 ranchers are pooling cattle, 600 head total. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Push hard for Sutter's Point. If we make it by the deadline, the buyer there will pay a premium for winter delivery. "How much?" "Enough." Rowan's grin was fierce. Enough to pay the bank and have something left to rebuild with. Marin threw her arms around him. Behind them, the other ranchers were dismounting, talking strategy, organizing supplies. Ruth came out with coffee and sandwiches. The girls ran circles around the horses, asking a million questions. And for the first time in months, the Mercer Ranch felt alive with something other than desperation. That night, after the other ranchers had gone home to prepare, Rowan and Maren stood in the garden. The rose bushes were bare now, stripped by winter. But the roots were strong. Come spring, they'd bloom. "I have to leave in the morning," Rowan said. "Be gone 3 weeks, maybe more." "I know. The bank deadline is in 2 days. If something happens to me out there, if the drive fails, it won't. But if it does," Maren put her hand over his mouth, "it won't. You're going to make that drive. You're going to get paid. And you're going to come home." Rowan pulled her hand away and kissed her palm. "You sound pretty sure." "I am, because you're too stubborn to fail. That's not reassuring. It's the truth." They stood there in the cold, holding each other, pretending neither of them was terrified. "When I get back," Rowan said quietly, "I want to marry you." Maren's breath caught. "What?" "I know it's too soon. I know the town will lose their minds, but I don't care anymore. I want you to be my wife. I want the girls to have you as their mother. I want—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I want to stop being scared of what might happen and start living like tomorrow's guaranteed." Maren looked up at him, this impossible man who'd given her a home when she had nothing. "Yes," she said. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. When you come back." Rowan kissed her like he was trying to memorize the taste of her mouth. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. 3 weeks, he said. "I'll be here." "I know you will." He left at dawn. Maren watched him ride out with the other men, driving 600 head of cattle toward a railhead 300 miles away through winter weather that could turn deadly in an instant. The girls stood on either side of her, holding her hands. "He'll be okay," Maisie said, though her voice wobbled. "He will," Maren agreed, though her chest was tight with fear. Wren didn't say anything, just squeezed Maren's hand tighter. They stood there until the dust settled and the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then Maren turned to the girls. "All right," she said. "We've got work to do." "What kind of work?" Maisie asked. Maren looked at the house, the garden, the ranch that had become her home. "The kind that makes sure he has something worth coming back to." The first week without Rowan felt like holding her breath underwater. Maren threw herself into work, anything to keep her mind off the 100 ways a cattle drive could go wrong. She and Ruth reorganized the barn, mended fences, inventoried supplies. The girls helped where they could, but mostly they just orbited Maren like small moons, unwilling to let her out of their sight for long. On the 3rd day, a rider came from town. Eleanor's father, the banker, sat on his horse at the edge of the property, looking smug. "Came to inform you that the loan deadline has passed," he called out. "Mr. Mercer has 48 hours to settle his debt, or I'll be forced to begin seizure proceedings." Maren walked to the fence line. "He's on a cattle drive. He'll have the money when he returns." "The deadline doesn't care where he is." The banker's smile was thin, "and neither do I." "He'll be back. Perhaps. But the law is the law, Mrs. Hale. Or should I say Miss? I can never remember which title applies to women of your situation." Maren's hands clenched. "You'll get your money." "I certainly hope so. It would be a shame to see those little girls lose their home." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day." He rode off. Maren stood there, rage and helplessness warring in her chest. Ruth came up beside her. "Don't let him get to you." "Hard not to. Rowan will make it back in time." "What if he doesn't?" Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll deal with it. But worrying yourself sick won't change anything." Maren knew she was right, but knowing something and feeling it were two different things. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch in the cold, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the dark horizon and trying not to imagine all the things that could go wrong. Stampedes, blizzards, accidents, Rowan lying hurt somewhere with no one to help him. The door creaked. Maisie came out in her nightgown, bare feet padding across the wood. "You're supposed to be asleep," Maren said. "So are you." Maisie climbed into her lap and burrowed under the blanket. "Are you worried about Papa?" "A little. Me too." Maisie was quiet for a moment. "But he always comes back. Even when Mama died, and we thought he might disappear into the sadness forever, he came back. For us." Maren held the girl tighter. "You're pretty smart. You know that?" "Wren's the smart one. I'm just loud." "You can be both." Maisie tilted her head back to look at Maren. "When Papa comes home, are you really going to marry him?" If he still wants me to. He will. He told us before he left. Marin's heart squeezed. He did? Yeah, he said when he got back he was going to make you part of our family for real, so you couldn't ever leave. Maisie's voice went small. You won't leave, will you? Even if things get hard? No, sweetheart. I won't leave. Promise? Promise. Maisie relaxed against her. Good. Because Ren and me already decided you're our new mama. We just didn't tell you yet because we didn't want to be pushy. Marin laughed, though it came out watery. You two could never be pushy. That's a lie and you know it. They sat together in the dark, watching stars wheel overhead, and Marin thought about what it meant to be chosen. Not by a husband who saw her as a convenience, but by two small girls who saw her as home. The second week was worse. Word spread that the deadline had passed, and Rowan still hadn't returned. People started circling like vultures, trying to figure out what would happen to the ranch, the cattle, the land. 3 different men approached Marin about buying pieces of the property when things went south. She sent all of them away with language that would have made Ruth proud. The town's judgment intensified too. Women whispered whenever Marin rode in for supplies. Men made comments just loud enough for her to hear. Someone left a note on the ranch gate calling her a gold-digging whore who destroyed a good man. Marin burned it and kept working. Because the truth was, she didn't know how else to be anymore. Running had never solved anything. Hiding had only made her smaller. The only thing left was to stand her ground and see what grew from it. On the 10th day, a storm rolled in. Not just rain, the kind of vicious winter storm that turned the world white and made travel impossible. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour. Wind howled around the house, rattling windows and tearing at the barn roof. Marin and Ruth brought the horses into the barn and secured everything they could. The girls stayed inside, faces pressed to the windows, watching the world disappear into swirling snow. Papa's out there, Ren whispered. He'll find shelter, Marin said, trying to sound confident. He's done this before. But the storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of wind and snow and cold so brutal that going from the house to the barn required a rope line to keep from getting lost. 3 days of Marin lying awake at night, imagining Rowan frozen somewhere on the trail, wondering if she'd ever see him again. On the 3rd night, Ren crawled into bed beside her. Can't sleep? Marin asked. Ren shook her head. Me neither. They lay there in the dark, listening to the wind scream. Mama used to say that storms were just the world cleaning itself, Ren said quietly, getting rid of the old dead things so new things could grow. Your mama sounds like she was very wise. She was, but she was wrong about some things too. Like what? Like thinking Papa would be okay without her. Ren's voice was barely audible. He wasn't okay, not for a long time. We could see it even when he tried to hide it. Marin pulled the girl closer. And now? Now he's better because of you. Ren looked up at her in the darkness. You make him remember how to be happy. That's more important than all the money in the world. Marin felt tears slide down her temples. Your mama would be proud of you, both of you. You think so? I know so. Ren was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you're going to be our new mama, the real kind, not the kind the town wanted Papa to marry. Me too, sweetheart. Even if we're poor? Even then. Ren snuggled closer and fell asleep. Marin lay awake watching snow pile against the window and prayed to whatever force governed the universe that Rowan was still alive out there. The storm broke on the morning of the 13th day. Marin woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and silence, the kind that felt almost holy after days of wind. She got dressed and went outside. The world had been transformed. Snow covered everything in drifts 3 feet high. The barn was half buried. The fence line had disappeared completely. It would take days to dig out. And Rowan was supposed to be back in less than a week. Ruth came out onto the porch. Well, shit. Yeah. You thinking what I'm thinking? That we're going to have to dig out this entire ranch with 2 women, 2 children, and prayer? Basically. Marin looked at the endless white expanse. Then she turned and went back inside. When she came out again, she was wearing her heavy coat and work gloves. Let's get started, she said. They worked for 5 days straight, digging out the barn, clearing paths to the corrals, breaking through drifts to check on the remaining cattle. The girls helped where they could, their small hands turning red from the cold despite their mittens. Other people came too. The blacksmith, Tom, showed up the second day with two of his sons. "Heard you might need help," was all he said. Then Webb, the farmer, with his wife and teenage daughter. Then a few of the ranch hands who'd quit but apparently felt guilty about it. One by one, people arrived with shovels and pickaxes and the kind of stubborn determination that frontier life either taught you or killed you for lacking. They didn't say much, just worked. By the 5th day, the ranch was functional again, battered, exhausted, but ready, and still no word from Rowan. The deadline was tomorrow. Marin stood in the yard at sunset, staring down the empty road, willing him to appear. Nothing. Tom came up beside her. "He'll make it." "You don't know that. I know Rowan Mercer, and I know he'd walk through fire to get back to you and those girls." Marin wanted to believe him, but hope was a fragile thing, and she'd broken it too many times before. That night, she didn't sleep at all. She sat at the kitchen table with Ruth, drinking coffee and watching the clock tick toward dawn. "What happens if he doesn't make it?" Marin asked quietly. "We fight," Ruth said simply. "We get a lawyer. We contest the seizure. We do whatever it takes." "With what money?" "With whatever we can scrape together." Ruth reached across the table and took Marin's hand. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." Marin squeezed back, grateful and terrified in equal measure. The sun rose. The deadline arrived. By noon, there was still no sign of Rowan. Marin was in the garden, working because stopping would mean accepting the worst, when she heard it. Hoofbeats. She looked up. A single rider was coming fast up the road. Her heart stopped, then started again, hammering, because she recognized that horse, that riding style, that silhouette against the winter sky. Rowan. She dropped her shovel and ran. He dismounted before his horse even stopped, stumbling slightly, clearly exhausted. His face was gaunt and wind-burned, his clothes filthy, but he was alive. He was alive! Marin crashed into him and he caught her, holding on like she was the only thing keeping him upright. "You made it," she gasped. "You're here. Told you I'd come back." His voice was rough, cracked from days in the cold. "The deadline? I know. Where's the banker?" "I don't—" A carriage appeared at the end of the road. Eleanor's father arriving right on schedule to seize the property. Rowan set Marin aside gently and turned to face him. The banker climbed out of his carriage, looking surprised to see Rowan. "Mr. Mercer, I didn't expect you to be here." "I bet you didn't." Rowan pulled an envelope from his coat, wrinkled and stained but intact. "Here's your money." The banker took it, counted quickly, and his face went pale. This is $10,000. That's what I owed, plus interest. But how the drive made it to Sutter's Point with 2 days to spare. Buyer paid premium rates for winter delivery, just like he promised. Rowan's smile was sharp. "Guess that means you don't get to steal my ranch after all." The banker's mouth worked soundlessly. Behind them, people had started gathering. The ranch hands who'd helped dig out, neighbors who'd come to see what would happen, even some townspeople who'd been waiting to watch the Mercer place get torn apart. All of them watching. "The money's counted and accounted for," Rowan said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "which means my debt to your bank is settled, in full. Unless you want to argue about it in front of all these witnesses?" The banker looked around at the crowd, then back at Rowan. "No," he said tightly. "No argument. The debt is settled." "Good. Then get off my property." The banker climbed back into his carriage and left without another word. A cheer went up from the crowd. People rushed forward to clap Rowan on the back, congratulate him, celebrate the victory. But Rowan just pulled Marin close and held on. "It's over," he said into her hair. "We made it." Marin was crying and laughing at the same time. "You crazy son of a— Papa!" The girls came running from the house, shrieking with joy. Rowan caught them both, lifting them off the ground despite his obvious exhaustion. "You came back," Maisie was sobbing. "You came back." "Of course I did." Rowan kissed the tops of their heads. "I promised, didn't I?" Wren just clung to him, silent tears streaming down her face. The celebration lasted into the evening. Ruth cooked everything in the house. Tom and Webb brought whiskey. People who'd helped dig out stayed to eat and drink and share in the impossible victory. But eventually, they all went home, and Rowan, Maren, and the girls were left alone. They sat together in the parlor, the twins curled up on either side of their father, Maren in the chair across from them, everyone too tired to move, but too happy to care. "I thought I lost you," Maren said quietly. Rowan looked at her over his daughters' heads. "Never. The storm was bad. Lost 2 men to frostbite. Had to hole up in an abandoned line shack for 3 days with nothing but each other and some very angry cattle." He smiled tiredly. "But we made it, because I had something worth coming back to." Maren felt her throat tighten. "Rowan, I mean it. Out there in that storm, when it got so cold I couldn't feel my fingers and the wind was screaming like the world was ending. You know what kept me going?" He shifted carefully, trying not to wake the girls who were already dozing. "The thought of you standing on this porch, waiting. The thought of marrying you in that garden you brought back to life. The thought of watching you raise my daughters, and maybe, if we're lucky, a few more kids besides." "More kids?" Maren's voice cracked. "If you want them, if—" He stopped, suddenly uncertain. "If you still want this, want us." Maren crossed the room and knelt in front of him. "I want this," she said fiercely. "I want you and these girls and this ranch and every difficult, beautiful, terrifying moment that comes with it. I want all of it." Rowan cupped her face in his hands, rough and calloused and warm. "Then marry me. Tomorrow, if you can wait that long." "Tomorrow's too soon." His face fell. "I need at least a week," Maren continued, "to make a dress that doesn't look like I stitched it together from flour sacks." Rowan laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him in weeks. "A week, then." "A week." He kissed her, careful not to disturb the sleeping girls in his lap. And Maren thought about how far she'd come from that woman sitting on a church step with nowhere to go. How she'd been so convinced that nobody would ever want her, that she'd never be enough. She'd been wrong. Not because she'd changed who she was, but because she'd finally found people who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Ruth helped Maren make a dress from fabric they found in the attic, simple cream-colored cotton that had belonged to Rowan's first wife. When Maren hesitated to use it, Ruth shook her head. "She'd want you to have it. She'd want her girls to have a mother who loved them." The twins threw themselves into decorating. They picked wildflowers from the edges of the property where snow had melted. They strung ribbons they'd been saving for years. They practiced walking down an imaginary aisle until Maisie tripped over her own feet and Wren dissolved into giggles. Word spread through the territory. Some people were scandalized. Others were supportive. Most just wanted to see if Rowan Mercer would actually go through with marrying the woman the whole town had judged. He would. The ceremony was held in the rose garden on a cold March afternoon. The bushes were still bare, but green buds had started appearing on the branches. The first signs of spring, of renewal, of life returning to places that had seemed dead forever. Maybe 40 people showed up. Tom and his family. Webb and his wife. The ranch hands who'd stayed loyal. Mrs. Chen, looking pleased with herself. Ruth, crying into her apron. And scattered throughout the crowd, people from neighboring ranches who'd pooled money to help, who'd come to dig out after the storm, who'd decided that maybe love was worth supporting even when it didn't make sense. Eleanor Pritchard didn't come. Neither did her father. Neither did most of the town's elite. Maren didn't care. She stood under an arbor the girls had built from branches, wearing a simple dress that fit her body without apology, and watched Rowan walk toward her. He looked nervous, happy, terrified, certain, human. The pastor from town, a young man who'd only recently arrived and hadn't learned to judge yet, performed the ceremony. "Do you, Rowan Mercer, take this woman?" "I do," Rowan interrupted. "I absolutely do." The pastor blinked. "I haven't finished the question." "Don't care, the answer's yes." People laughed. The pastor turned to Maren. "And do you keep—" "Yes," Maren said. Whatever the question is, yes." More laughter. The pastor smiled. "Well then, by the authority vested in me and the state of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may—" Rowan was already kissing her. The crowd cheered. The twins rushed forward and wrapped their arms around both of them. creating a messy, joyful tangle of family that felt more right than any ceremony could capture. When they finally broke apart, Maisie tugged on Maren's dress. "Can we call you Mama now?" she asked. "For real?" Maren knelt down so she was eye level with both girls. "Only if you want to." "We want to," Wren said solemnly. "Then yes." Maren pulled them close. "You can call me Mama." The celebration afterward was simple. Food and music and people dancing in the yard despite the cold. Maren danced with Rowan, with Tom, with the girls, with anyone who asked. At one point, she found herself standing with Ruth, watching the festivities. "You did good," Ruth said. "We all did." "No, you did. You could have run when things got hard. Most people would have, but you stayed. You fought. And now look." Ruth gestured at the scene. Rowan laughing with his daughters, neighbors celebrating, the ranch still standing. "You made this happen." Maren shook her head. "I just showed up. The rest of you did the work." "That's horseshit, and you know it." Ruth looked at her seriously. "You showed that man what it meant to choose love over fear. That's not nothing." Later, after the guests had gone home and the girls had fallen asleep exhausted from dancing, Rowan and Maren stood in the garden together. "You tired?" he asked. "Exhausted." "Want to go inside?" "Not yet." Maren looked at the bare rose bushes, already imagining them covered in blooms. "I want to stay out here a little longer." Rowan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Okay." They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "You know what I realized out there on that drive?" Rowan said after a while. "What?" "That I'd spent 8 months thinking the best part of my life was behind me, that I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it, that the only thing left was to survive. And now? Now I know I was wrong." He turned her to face him. "The best part of my life is right now. This moment. You, the girls, this ranch, all of it." Maren touched his face. "Even though it's hard? Even though people still talk?" "Especially because of that." Rowan's voice was fierce. "Because we chose this. We fought for it, and nobody can take that away from us." Maren thought about everything they'd been through, the judgment, the poverty, the storms and deadlines and moments when failure seemed inevitable, and she thought about what they'd built despite it all. Not a perfect life, not an easy one, but a real one, the kind that belonged to them and nobody else. "I love you," she said. Rowan smiled. "I love you too. Even though I'm—" He put a finger over her lips. Don't finish that sentence. You're exactly who you're supposed to be, and I wouldn't change a single thing." Maren felt something in her chest finally, completely relax. The part that had been waiting for him to realize his mistake. The part that still believed she wasn't enough. That part went quiet. Because maybe, finally, she was starting to believe what everyone else already saw. That she was enough. That she'd always been enough. That being chosen wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to stay when staying was hard. Spring came to Red Hollow Ridge like a promise kept. The roses bloomed in wild profusion, reds and pinks and whites cascading over the garden beds, spreading their scent across the property. People started coming from neighboring towns to see them, to buy cuttings, to walk through the paths Maren had created. The ranch started turning a profit again. Not huge sums, but enough. Enough to rebuild what they'd almost lost. Enough to hire back some of the hands who'd quit. Enough to start planning for the future instead of just surviving the present. The twins thrived. Maisie's loudness became confidence. Wren's quietness became thoughtfulness. They both started calling Maren Mama without hesitation, without the painful awareness that she was a replacement. She wasn't a replacement. She was something new, something different, something that honored what came before while building something that belonged to now. And the town, slowly, grudgingly, started to accept it. Not everyone. There were still people who crossed the street to avoid Maren. Still women who whispered behind their hands. Still men who made crude comments when they thought Rowan couldn't hear. But there were also people who nodded at her in the street, who bought roses from her garden, who brought their daughters to learn about plants and growing things, who saw her not as a scandal, but as a woman who'd survived and kept surviving. One afternoon in late May, Marin was working in the garden when Eleanor Pritchard appeared at the gate. Marin stood up, wiping dirt from her hands, wary. Eleanor looked different, thinner, harder around the edges. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "Then why are you here?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, looking at the roses. "My father lost the bank. His creditors called in his loans. Everything he built is gone." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Marin thought about it. "Yes. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Eleanor laughed bitterly. "Even the man who tried to destroy your husband? Even him." They stood in awkward silence. "I was supposed to marry Rowan," Eleanor said finally. "It was arranged, expected. My father wanted the land, I wanted—" She trailed off. "I don't even know what I wanted. Security, maybe. Status. The kind of life where nothing unexpected ever happened." "That sounds lonely." "It would have been." Eleanor looked at Marin. "But I would have been appropriate, acceptable. Everything you're not." The word should have stung. Instead, Marin felt only pity. "You're right," she said. "I'm not appropriate. I'm too loud, too big, too damaged by everything that came before. But I'm real. And that's enough for the people who matter." Eleanor's expression cracked slightly. "I envy you." "Why?" "Because you have something I'll never have. You have people who chose you, not because you fit some image they had in their heads, but because of who you actually are." She turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I hope you're happy. Really happy. Not the kind people pretend to be." She walked away before Marin could respond. Marin stood there, watching her go, and felt something shift in her chest. Not pity anymore. Understanding. Because she knew what it was like to live for other people's expectations. To twist yourself into shapes that didn't fit just to be acceptable. She'd been Eleanor once, or close enough. The difference was, she'd been given a choice. Stay small and safe and appropriate. Or risk everything for something real. She'd chosen real. And that choice had changed everything. That evening, Marin and Rowan sat on the porch while the girls played in the yard. "Eleanor came by today," Marin said. Rowan looked over. "What did she want?" "To tell me she envied us, I think." "That's unexpected." It was honest. Marin watched Maisie chase Wren in circles, both of them laughing. "I've been thinking about what this all means. This whole journey, everything we went through to get here. And I think we did something important. Not just for us, but for everyone watching." Rowan raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Marin chose her words carefully. "We showed people that love doesn't have to look the way they expect it to. That families can be built, not just born. That sometimes the best thing you can do is stop trying to fit someone else's idea of who you should be and just exist. Messy and imperfect and real." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're giving us too much credit. We were just trying to survive." "Maybe. But survival looks like a lot of things. And sometimes it looks like choosing to be happy even when everyone says you shouldn't be." Rowan pulled her close. "Is that what we did?" "That's exactly what we did." They sat together, watching the sun set over the ranch they'd almost lost, and Marin thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The wife who wasn't enough. The woman nobody wanted. The stranger sleeping on church steps. The gardener who brought dead things back to life. The mother who'd been chosen by two small girls. The wife who'd been chosen by a man brave enough to love her. All of those women lived inside her still. But they didn't define her anymore. Because the truth she'd learned, the truth that had saved her, was simpler than she'd ever imagined. She didn't need to be perfect to be loved. She didn't need to be appropriate to matter. She just needed to be herself. Flawed and loud and difficult and real. And that had always been enough. 6 months later, on a warm October afternoon, Marin stood in the rose garden with Ruth and the twins, watching workers install a new sign above the entrance. Mercer and Hale Rose Garden. Not because they'd gotten married and merged names legally, though they had, but because the girls had insisted, had painted the sign themselves, had declared that this garden belonged to all of them equally. Marin traced the letters with her fingers, feeling the rough paint, the evidence of small hands working hard. "You like it?" Maisie asked anxiously. "I love it." "Really? Really?" Wren smiled, the quiet, knowing smile that meant she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. People came to visit the garden now. Not huge crowds, but enough. Enough to make it profitable. Enough to turn it into something the territory talked about. The place where roses grew even in harsh soil, where beauty bloomed despite everything working against it. They'd started selling cuttings, teaching classes, hosting small weddings for couples who wanted something different from the stuffy church ceremonies. It wasn't what Maren had imagined when she first arrived in Red Hollow Ridge with one suitcase and nowhere to go. It was better because it was hers, theirs, built by hands that had known hardship and chosen to create something beautiful anyway. That night, after the girls were asleep, Maren found Rowan in his office. "Come to bed," she said. "In a minute. Just finishing the books." Maren walked over and looked at the ledger he was studying. "We doing okay?" "Better than okay. The garden's bringing in steady income. The cattle contracts are solid, and Tom's been sending buyers our way." Rowan leaned back in his chair. "We're going to be fine." "Just fine?" "More than fine. We're going to thrive." Maren sat on the edge of his desk. "You sound surprised." "I am, a little. A year ago, I thought I was going to lose everything. Now I have more than I ever did." "The ranch is worth more?" "No, well, yes, but that's not what I mean." Rowan pulled her into his lap. "I mean, I have you. I have the girls smiling again. I have a life that feels like living instead of just enduring." Maren rested her forehead against his. "Me too." "Yeah? Yeah." She pulled back to look at him. "I spent so many years thinking happiness was something other people got, that I'd had my chance and missed it, that the best I could hope for was to survive without causing too much trouble. And now I know I was wrong. Happiness isn't something you get once and lose forever. It's something you build, every day, with people who see you and choose you and stick around even when it's hard." Rowan kissed her softly. "That's pretty wise." "I learned from the best." "Ruth?" Maren laughed. "The girls, actually. They knew what mattered long before we did." They sat together in the quiet office, holding each other, and Maren thought about the question she'd carried with her since Thomas left. Was she enough? The answer had always been yes. She just needed to find people who already knew it. And now, in this house full of laughter and arguments and ordinary love, surrounded by roses that had bloomed against all odds and children who called her mama without hesitation. Now she finally believed it too. The woman nobody wanted had found a family that chose her every single day. Not because she'd changed who she was, but because she'd finally found the courage to be exactly that person. Loud and imperfect and real and enough. Always enough. And that, Maren thought as Rowan carried her upstairs and the house settled around them, was the only lesson that really mattered. You don't have to be perfect to deserve love. You don't have to fit someone else's expectations to matter. You just have to be brave enough to keep existing, keep trying, keep believing that somewhere out there are people who will see you clearly and love you anyway, not despite your flaws, but because of them. Because those flaws are what make you human. And being human, messy and struggling and beautifully imperfect, is the most worthwhile thing you can be.